All right, let's jump right in. If you work in the early years sector, things are about to get a major shakeup. We're unpacking the big 2025 reforms to the Early Years Foundation Stage, or EYFS. And I'm not talking about minor tweaks here and there. These are some of the most significant safeguarding updates we've seen in years, all designed to raise the safety bar for every single child in your care.
So, here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off with the timeline, how we got here. Then we'll dig into the new rules for safer eating, tackle the critical changes to pediatric first aid, cover some other key system updates, and we'll wrap up with a solid action plan to get you ready.
First up, the countdown to 2025. So, you might be asking, why these big changes and why right now? Well, it really boils down to two key things. The early year sector is growing like crazy, and we need to make sure our safety standards are keeping pace.
So this whole process didn't just appear out of nowhere. It all started with a public consultation back in spring 2024. The government published its response in October, confirming the changes. But the one date you really need to circle on your calendar is September 1st, 2025. That's when all of this goes live.
And who asked for these changes? Well, it wasn't some stuffy committee in a back room. The government heard from over 1,400 people. And get this, the biggest group by far, a whopping 41%, was setting managers. People just like you, on the front lines. So these reforms were truly built from the ground up.
Okay, next section. And honestly, this might be the single biggest change of the lot. For the very first time, the EYFS is getting super specific about how to manage the risks that come with mealtimes. This is a biggie.
Which leads to the obvious question. Why the new focus on mealtimes all of a sudden? I mean, it's always been part of the day, right? Well, the old guidance was, let's just say, a bit vague. Feedback from the sector, and tragically from past incidents, made it crystal clear that we needed more specific rules.
The hard truth is that for young children, mealtimes can be a really high-risk part of the day. You've got their tiny airways, and they're still developing immune systems. It's a perfect storm for choking and severe allergic reactions. The government saw this and said, yep, this is serious enough to need its own brand new explicit focus. So what does this actually look like day to day? It's basically a four-step game plan. First, you need detailed allergy and dietary info before a child even starts. Second, food prep is now spelled out. You know the drill. Quartering grapes, slicing carrots. Third, supervision needs to be active. Staff have to be facing the kids to spot silent choking. And fourth, if an incident does happen, you must record it and, crucially, tell the parents.
Now, having all these new rules for mealtimes is great, but they're not much good if your team isn't ready to handle an emergency. And that leads us straight to our next point, which is absolutely critical. We're talking about the pediatric first aid mandate. Honestly, this change is the foundation that makes everything else work.
Let's just take a second to appreciate how huge this change is. The old rule, you just needed one PFA-trained person somewhere on site. But now, it is a whole different ballgame. A PFA-trained staff member must be physically in the room whenever children are eating. And here's the other kicker. Any student or trainee you're counting in your ratios now needs to have that PFA certificate too. This is a massive step.
And you know what? The sector was totally on board with this. When the government asked, a solid 68% of people agreed that trainees and ratios needed to be PFA qualified. Everyone knew it would make kids safer, and that benefit was just too important to ignore.
So what's the practical takeaway for you as a manager? Well, Paul Kenny, a leading expert from the First Aid Garage, just nails it with this advice. He says you have to get into your rotas and actively plan to make sure a first aider is always there, especially at mealtimes. This isn't about having a certificate on the wall anymore. It's an active, daily operational priority. Okay, moving on. It's not just about food and first aid. These reforms are also about strengthening the entire system to build a stronger, safer culture for staff and children alike. This part covers four main areas: how you hire people, the designated safeguarding lead role, new training rules, and a brand new requirement for a whistleblowing policy. Let's quickly break each of those down.
Right, here's the quick rundown. Recruitment is getting tighter. You now must get references before you officially offer someone a job. Simple as that.
The DSL title is being standardized, just so everyone's using the same language as schools. Training renewal is now every 2 years, not 3, so it's a faster refresh cycle. And this one's huge. Every setting now must have a formal whistleblowing policy, giving staff a clear, safe process to raise concerns.
And that brings us to the final and maybe most important section. We've covered a lot of ground, but now it's about what you actually do with all this information. Let's get practical and create your action plan for September 2025.
Here it is, your 5-step plan to get your setting ready. Number 1, audit your staff rotas immediately. That mealtime PFA coverage is non-negotiable. 2, get training booked in the calendar now for first aid and for the new safeguarding rules. 3, write up and share your new policies on food and allergies. Communication is everything. 4, physically walk through your dining area. Can you see every child? If not, move some tables. And 5, formalize your new hiring and whistleblowing procedures so they are ready to go.
You know, when you boil it all down, that's what all these changes are about. It's about taking the fantastic practices from the safest settings and making them the standard for absolutely everyone. It's a lot, I know, but every single reform points to that one simple, crucial goal: keeping children safe. So, with the clock ticking down to 2025, there's really only one question left to ask. Is your setting ready?